Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at family matters, Exodus chapter 18, in our continuing study through the book of Exodus. Exodus 18:1. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife, Zipporah, after he had sent her away, and her two sons, of whom one was named Gershom, for Moses had said, I have been a Gershom, I've been a sojourner in a foreign land. The other was named Eleazar, for he said, the God, remember God is El, the God, the El of my father, was my Ezer, was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And so Jethro comes and meets Moses, and he's bringing the wife of Moses, Jethro's own daughter, and their two sons. Remember, there had been an issue on at least one of those sons of circumcision. We saw that back in chapter 4. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was camped at the Mount of God. And then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. This is actually sort of a family reunion. Notice what takes place when they go in. Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on the journey, and how the Lord had delivered him. So everything we've read in the book of Exodus, from chapter 3 all the way up to the present, Moses relates to his father-in-law. Verse 9, Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of the Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Now, notice, he didn't necessarily know that previously. Jethro knew about God. He knew of God the way he knew of a lot of other gods, but now he says, I've finally come to the realization that the Lord, that is Yahweh, is greater than all those other gods. It was proven when they dealt proudly against the people. This was an evangelistic meeting for Jethro. And the events of the Exodus, the events of the plagues and the parting of the Red Sea and the destruction of the Egyptian army, were those things that brought Jethro to faith in God. And Jethro is not the only one. This may have been the greatest evangelical tool, the greatest evangelistic tool that the world had ever seen. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before God, and they break bread and they worship the Lord. It came about the next day. Notice the next day, the meal's over, it's back to business as usual. It came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from morning until the evening. It's an all-day job. And Jethro looks at Moses and looks at how he's having to judge between every individual case, every little interpretation of law, and Jethro says, you're doing it wrong. And he gives Moses some good advice. Some good advice about delegation of authority and how to do ministry, and it's going to work for Moses, it's going to work for the Israelites, and it also works in the church today and in all sorts of areas where delegation is needed. He says, furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. That is, he's going to divide the people into groups so that they can have leaders over them. Notice some are able to handle thousands, some hundreds, some fifties, some tens. Let them judge the people at all times. And let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So if it's something really big, then sure, they can bring it to you. But if it's the minor, everyday, humdrum sort of case, you teach them, and they'll pass on that judgment to other people. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. This was a call for delegation. And delegation in the running of a nation, or delegation in the running of a church, or delegation in the running of a business is always important. So Moses listened to his father-in-law. That's a good thing. Sometimes your father-in-law has it right. And did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. So of course, he had to find faithful men. But then when you find those faithful men, you trust them and you let them lead. They judged the people at all times. The difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge.